Hey, before we get into it tonight, do me a small favor. If you enjoy these sleepy, miserable history lessons, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me what time it is, where you are, and where you're listening from. I love seeing where all the tired, curious brains are tuning in around the world. Seriously, every comment is like a tiny lantern in the dark. Now dim the lights. Maybe put on a fan. Settle into your blanket burrito. And get ready to be very, very grateful for central heating, antibiotics, and the fact that you do not, and I mean do not, work as a tanner in 1700s America, because tonight, you do. Congratulations. You've just woken up in a colonial settlement in 1720. The air smells like smoke, salt, and livestock. It's cold, your bones hurt, and your job, well, your job is disgusting. The good news, you're not dead. The bad news, you're about to spend the next 12 hours knee-deep in rotting flesh, animal guts, and something called piss liquor. That's right. You're a tanner now, and you wouldn't last a day. Your bed is just a straw mattress shoved into the corner of a timber shack. It creaks like a guilty conscience and smells faintly of moldy socks and goat. There are no pillows, no mattress topper, no memory foam that remembers anything except pain. Just a wool blanket full of bugs and regret. You blink awake. It's dark, still early. Your feet touch the floor and immediately regret existing. The wooden planks are damp, freezing, probably mildewed. You stretch and your spine makes that sound. That dry snap like firewood. That's normal. You're 28 years old, which means you've aged out of romance novels and into lower back problems. You pull on your only shirt, which you've worn for longer than you're willing to admit. It's stiff. Smells like whatever died behind the barn last week. Your breeches are damp. Again, you can't tell if it's sweat, dew, or some unholy combination of the two. You shove your feet into leather shoes so thin they qualify as a suggestion and lace them up while swearing quietly. You're already sore. You haven't even started work yet. Outside it's gray. The sky is sulking. Your breath fogs as you walk, because of course it's cold. Colonial America doesn't care about your comfort. There's no thermostat, just wind. Damp, slapping, soul-hollowing wind. It sneaks through your clothes, up your sleeves, and down your neck like it's trying to start a fight. The tannery is only a short walk away, but you can smell it long before you see it. It hits you in the face like a wet slap. A thick, meaty, sour stench that lingers in your teeth and clings to your hair. This is your office, a mud pit of hide, blood, and buckets of fermented horror. The first step? Collecting the hides. Now, colonial hides don't come pre-cleaned. They come straight off the cow or the deer or the sheep, still warm, still sticky, still full of all the things that used to be inside. You get to scrape all that off, with a dull knife, on a wooden beam, while the sun comes up and the flies wake up and your breakfast churns like it's trying to escape. Hair, flesh, fat. It all comes off in greasy curls. Your hands are red, your shoulders burn. You don't wear gloves. No one does. Not because you're tough, but because gloves don't exist yet in your price range. Next, you soak the hides in a vat of water, lime, and, wait for it, urine. Human urine. Also called piss liquor. Yep, that's what they call it. You stand there with your arms elbow deep in a chemical stew of ammonia and decomposing animal. It smells like failure and boiled nightmares. You stir. You gag. You keep stirring. Why the pee? Because it helps break down the hair and fat, softens the hide, and makes your life even more awful. You look down and realize your hands are peeling. Again, just another day in the life. And this is just the morning shift. By noon, your stomach growls. You're starving. You pull out your lunch, bread so hard you could use it as a weapon, a chunk of salted pork that's mostly fat, and a cup of sour cider that's somehow both weak and offensive. You chew, you swallow. You try not to taste anything. There's no soap, no water to wash your hands. You eat with the same fingers that were massaging cow skin and pee an hour ago. Welcome to Colonial hygiene. Hope your immune system's up for the challenge. Back to work. You haul the hides out of the vat one by one. They're heavy, slippery, the edges squish. You don't ask why. You lay them out to dry, then rub in brain matter. Yes, animal brains. Because colonial Americans figured out that brains have natural enzymes that help soften hides. So you take a scoop, smear it across the leather, and pretend you're not crying a little inside. Then come the tannins. You soak the hides again, this time in a mixture of tree bark and water for weeks, literally weeks. They ferment, they change color, they become usable leather. You haul buckets, chop bark, stir with a wooden pole, and try not to inhale too deeply because the scent is something between old beer and wet dog in a sun-baked outhouse. This is your life. You go home caked in grime. Your skin is raw, your nails are black, your clothes reek. The neighbors cross the road when they see you coming. Romance? Forget it. No one wants to marry the guy who smells like a cow corpse wrapped in a fart. But hey, at least it's honest work, right? You drag yourself into bed. The straw pokes your back. Your feet throb. Your arms buzz. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if you'll ever feel clean again. And tomorrow, you'll do it all over again. Because in colonial America, tanning isn't just a job. It's a punishment someone tricked you into accepting. You wouldn't last a day. But we're not done yet. Not even close. Because you've got options. You could have been a tanner or a gravedigger. Oh, good. Let's talk about that next. South. Let's say you weren't unlucky enough to be a tanner. Let's say instead that your job involves the dead, not praying over them, not remembering them fondly, not writing tragic poems with ink and sadness. You dig them up, or down, depending on the day. You're a colonial-era gravedigger. Congratulations. You've officially made death your day job. And it's worse than it sounds. It's still cold. It's always cold. It's either that or raining, or both. The sky doesn't like you, and the clouds are passive-aggressively trying to wash you off the face of the earth. Your tools are simple: a shovel, a pick, a wheelbarrow with a cracked wheel that veers dramatically to the left. You don't get boots. You get wet feet. And every step you take makes that sound, that thick, muddy suck, like the earth itself wants to keep you. You start your day by walking out to the churchyard. That's where the dead go. Unless you live in a settlement too small for a church, in which case it's the field behind someone's barn. Either way, the ground is lumpy, crooked. Some graves are marked, others aren't. Sometimes they sink in. You try not to think about why. You've got a fresh body coming in today, another fever. That's number 4 this week. The family can't afford a coffin, so it's a wrapped bundle of linen, tied up like a sad roast. You don't look too closely. You don't want to see the face. You dig. The soil is heavy, wet, cold. Your shoulders scream. Your back pops like a musket misfire. The wind cuts through your shirt and makes your fingers burn, then go numb. There are blisters on your hands from yesterday. One of them opened again. Blood mixes with the dirt. No one notices. You're aiming for 6 feet, but let's be honest. You stop when your knees give out. Some graves are only 4 feet deep. Some are less. No one measures. No one's watching. You lay the body in. You pause for a second, not out of reverence, just to breathe. Then you cover it back up, one shovel at a time. You pack the dirt with your boots. Say a few words if someone's nearby. If not, just nod to yourself and go. And that was the easy part. Because sometimes, you're not burying someone. You're unburying them. Exhumations, reburials, or worse, grave robbing. Not always for money. Sometimes just because the town moved, or the family changed its mind, or there's been an incident. You don't ask questions. You just dig. The worst days are in the summer. You know why? The bodies don't stay quiet. They bloat. They burst. They ooze. The smell is something ancient, something that finds its way into your teeth, into your hair, into your soul. It follows you home like a stray dog that hates you. You strip your clothes off outside the house so your wife doesn't throw you out again. Or maybe you live alone. Gravediggers tend to. There's a reason for that. People don't invite you to dinner. You smell like decay and bad luck. You're the last person they want to see unless they're already dead. You eat alone, sleep alone, wake up alone. You don't go to church unless someone's being buried. You dig by day, you drink by night, and in between, you dream. Not of anything good. Sometimes, you dream of the ones you buried, sometimes of the ones you didn't. You dream of shallow graves and cold hands. You dream of being the one under the dirt, and no one showing up to dig you out. You wouldn't last a day. But hey, maybe you weren't assigned to death duty. Maybe you're on something more wholesome, like soap making. Oh no. Let's do that next. South. You didn't get stuck scraping hides or digging holes full of sadness. Lucky you. Instead, you work in what they call a respectable domestic trade. You make soap, and it's worse than it sounds. First off, let's be clear. Colonial soap is not scented. It does not smell like lavender fields or almond milk or whatever your fancy bar says on the label today. It smells like burning nightmares and regret. You know why? Because it's made from ashes and fat. That's it. That's the secret recipe. You wake up before the sun, because you always do. Not because you're disciplined, but because your neighbor's rooster is the devil. You throw on the same wool shift you've worn all week, wipe last night's smoke from your eyes, and head to the yard where the soap barrels are waiting. They're heavy, they're splintery, they're full of sludge. The first step? Lie. You don't buy it, you make it. By burning wood down to ash, then pouring water through the ash over and over until the liquid becomes so caustic it can dissolve flesh. This is called lye water. You make it in a barrel that leaks if it's feeling dramatic. You collect rainwater in another barrel and hope it didn't pass through anything horrifying on the way down. You pour, you stir. You don't wear gloves because what are gloves? You splash some on your foot and pretend it doesn't hurt. Next, you get the fat. Animal fat. Specifically, the leftover fatty bits from butchering, organs, tallow, suet, the stuff no one wants to eat but everyone expects you to render down. It's greasy, slippery, smells like last week's stew if it died in a hot cellar. You toss it into a pot the size of a bathtub and start boiling. Welcome to the scent of your life. Smoke, boiling fat, and chemical ash stew. You stir and stir until it all becomes one gloppy, bubbling horror. It's hot. Your arms ache. The pot belches. Something pops. You wipe your face with your sleeve, instantly regret it, and keep going. Add lye water to the fat. Stir. Watch it curdle. Smells like feet, vinegar, and something you shouldn't name. Eventually, it cools into a gritty block of beige despair. Soap. But not the kind you want to touch. Because this soap isn't gentle. It's aggressive. It will clean your clothes, strip your skin, and permanently alter your sense of smell. This is not a beauty product. This is punishment in solid form. And you're expected to use it. On everything. Clothes, dishes, hair, children, livestock, wooden floors, your own stinky feet. You scrub your knuckles raw. Your hands crack open. The soap doesn't foam. It just scours. Your skin starts to look like aged parchment and feel like bark. But hey, at least you're clean. If you're a woman, this is probably your job on top of 10 other jobs you didn't ask for. Soap making isn't a full-time career. It's just part of surviving. Something you squeeze in between raising babies, cooking everything from scratch, hauling water from the creek, and pretending your teeth don't hurt. You smell like lye. Your hair's dry. You haven't had a moment to yourself since the last harvest. And the worst part? Everyone just assumes you'll keep doing it. No thanks. No pay. No days off. Just more fat, more ash, more barrels full of danger. You wouldn't last a day. But maybe soap isn't your thing. Maybe you're more into childcare. Let's talk about being a colonial wet nurse. It's exactly as awkward as it sounds. Okay, so tanning was disgusting, grave digging was sad, soap making was painful, and now you're a wet nurse. Which sounds vaguely cozy until you remember what it actually means. You're breastfeeding someone else's baby. Not out of love. Not because you want to. Not because you volunteered. But because you need money, and you have working boobs. That's it. That's the resume. So now you wake up sore, leaky, and underpaid in a cold, smoky one-room cabin that smells like boiled cabbage and wet socks. Your own baby is sleeping beside you. Probably. You hope. But before you can feed them, you have to go feed someone else's. You throw on your shift. No corset. You don't have time for that. Just a frayed bodice and a wool wrap that smells like last week's soup. Your breasts are already aching. They've been full since midnight. The linen is soaked. Your arms hurt. Your back hurts. Everything hurts. You walk through mud to the big house. That's what they call it. The big house. You knock. Someone opens the door without looking at you. They wave you in like a servant, which is accurate. The baby is already screaming. And not your baby. Somebody else's plump, pink, clean little bundle with a lace bonnet and a silver rattle that costs more than your house. You sit down on the same stool as yesterday. You unlatch your bodice. You try not to think about the smell of your own body, or the hunger in your stomach, or the fact that your own baby hasn't eaten yet. The baby latches. It sucks hard. It's uncomfortable. You flinch. You don't say anything. You rock. You hum. You fake a smile for the mistress of the house who keeps commenting on your milk flow like it's a crop yield. This goes on for weeks, months, and you keep leaking, all the time. Through your dress, in public, during chores, you wake up soaked, you smell like spoiled cream and regret, your breasts are chafed, you haven't had a proper meal in days. And every time you ask when your own child can nurse, you're told to wait. The master's baby comes first. You start to feel dizzy, weak, angry, but you keep going. Because if you don't get paid. And if you don't get paid, your baby doesn't eat at all. There's no lactation consultant, no freezer stash, no support group with herbal tea and affirmations. Just the sound of someone else's child crying at 3 a.m. And the knowledge that your milk is going to a name you'll never be allowed to say out loud. You wouldn't last a day. But hey, at least you're not a chimney sweep. Because that job, that one's for the kids. You're not a tanner, or a soap maker, or a gravedigger, or a wet nurse whose body is treated like a public utility. Nope, you're a child. And your job? Chimney sweep. That's right, you're 6 years old, maybe 7. Old enough to walk, small enough to fit inside a soot-choked death pipe. You wake up on a straw mattress that's damp on one side and alive on the other. Your shirt is stiff with smoke. Your hands are black. Your eyes are full of ash. You cough before you're even fully conscious. No one says, "Good morning." Your boss just kicks your foot and tells you to hurry up. There's no breakfast. Just stale bread if you're lucky and a quick slap if you're not. You carry a bundle of tools, wire brushes, scraping rods, and a burlap sack that smells like fire and failure. Then you go to work. Your job is simple. Climb into a fireplace and then up a narrow chimney flue no wider than your shoulders and scrape soot off the walls with your bare hands or a small brush. Simple. Unless you're claustrophobic, human, or unwilling to risk slow suffocation for half a crust of bread. You start the climb. It's dark, tight. The brick scrapes your back. Your knees buckle. You push upward with your elbows, then your feet, then your elbows again. You can't breathe. The soot falls in clumps, into your mouth, into your eyes. It coats your skin. It settles in your lungs. You cough, but quietly, so they don't think you're slacking. You reach the top. Brush the chimney cap. Scrape the soot down. Climb back down, even though your muscles are screaming and your joints are too young to be this sore. Sometimes you get stuck. Sometimes the flue narrows without warning. Sometimes you panic, but there's no one to help. If you pass out, they wait until you either wake up or die. Then they send another child up to finish the job. You get paid in food. If you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you get yelled at, beaten, or blamed for the fire that breaks out next week when someone's fireplace goes uncleaned because you fainted in the flue. Your lungs will never recover. You will wheeze for the rest of your short life. You're 8 years old and already coughing up black stuff every morning. And at night, when you try to sleep, your back hurts, your arms twitch, and your eyes stay red from the smoke that never quite washes off. No one tucks you in. No one tells you did a good job. Because no one thinks a chimney sweep needs kindness. You wouldn't last a day. But you're not alone. There's a whole cast of people working jobs just as grim. Let's talk about the woman who boils sugar. Yes, that's a job. Yes, it's horrible. All right, you've survived the tannery, the graveyard, the soap barrel, the baby you don't get to keep, and the inside of a chimney. Let's give you a job that sounds sweeter. You work in sugar, boiling it, which sounds like something your great aunt does before pouring it on peaches. Except, no, this is colonial America, and this sugar wants to kill you. First, let's clarify something. Sugar doesn't grow in Massachusetts, or New York, or Pennsylvania. It comes from the Caribbean, from sugarcane fields worked by enslaved people. It's cut, mashed, processed, and shipped north as raw molasses. That's where you come in. Your job? Turn that molasses into something usable, and you do it in a shed that gets so hot it makes your eyeballs sweat. The barrels arrive sloshing with thick, dark syrup. You pry them open. The smell hits you immediately. Sweet, yes, but also sour, heavy, like overripe fruit and wet wood and old sweat. You pour it into a cast iron cauldron that's so big you could drown in it. And you might, because this isn't just boiling. This is industrial strength simmering death. The molasses bubbles, it hisses, it spits. It's like watching lava stew. You stand over it with a wooden paddle and stir, and stir, and stir. Your hands blister. The paddle handle burns hot. The steam rises into your face. Your apron is soaked. Your skin sticks to itself. There's no thermometer, no timer. You just watch until the consistency is right, which is vague and wrong. You lean closer. Your face gets blasted by heat. A drop of syrup lands on your hand. It burns through the top layer of skin before you even scream. You can't wipe your face because your sleeves are also covered in sugar, which means you're sticky all the time for the rest of your shift. In summer, it's unbearable. Insects flock to you like you're a human lollipop. Flies, gnats, bees, they hover, land, crawl across your neck. You swat at them with one hand while the other stirs. God help you if one lands in the pot. You'll have to fish it out, pretend it didn't happen, and keep going. Because restarting means wasting a whole barrel, which means punishment. Your shoes are ruined. The floor is always slick. You've slipped more times than you can count. There's a burn scar on your left shin, another one on your wrist, and once, when you passed out from heat, no one noticed for 10 minutes. When the sugar is finally thick enough, you pour it into molds, except you don't have gloves. So your hands get splashed again, and now you're sticky, bleeding, and burned. At the end of the day, your skin is coated in a shiny layer of suffering. It hardens. It cracks. You feel like a candied apple that's been dropped down a well. And worst of all, you don't even get to eat the sugar. That's for the wealthy. You get some coarse bread, maybe a cold potato, and another burn tomorrow. You wouldn't last a day. Let's cool things off with a less dangerous job. How about a field hand? Still awful, just in a different flavor. Let's say you didn't get burned in the sugar shed, or crushed in a chimney, or soaked in soap sludge. Let's say you've got a job that's outdoorsy. You're a field hand, which means from sunup to sundown, you're outside. Congratulations. The sun is now your boss, and it hates you. You wake up before light even touches the window. If you even have a window, most cabins don't. You pull yourself off the straw mat you share with 3 of your siblings and stretch your back until it pops like dry twigs. You eat cold porridge, or maybe last night's stew, assuming someone remembered to cover it from the rats. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve and step outside into damp dirt and fog. Your job today is everything. Plowing, planting, harvesting, hauling, fixing, building. The tools, wooden handles, iron blades that wobble, a yoke for the oxen that digs into your shoulder like a vengeful ghost. Your clothes? Scratchy wool or coarse linen, patched 5 times over. Your hat is made of straw. So is your soul at this point. You step into the field and it hits you, the sheer size of it. The endless lines of corn or tobacco or wheat stretching so far they hurt your eyes. You start with the plow. The oxen are in a mood. So are you. You pull, guide, stumble, and try not to trip over a root and faceplant in the furrow. Your feet sink into the soil. Your legs ache. Your hands blister. The sun comes up and doesn't stop. By noon, you're drenched. Your shirt sticks to you. Your mouth is dry. You sip warm water from a leather pouch that smells like feet. You chew hard bread with a cracked molar and try not to think about the fact that dinner is probably more of the same. Then back to it. Your back screams. Your shoulders burn. Your arms go numb. You keep moving. Because if you stop, you fall behind. And if you fall behind, the crop fails. And if the crop fails, everyone starves. No pressure. Sometimes you get rained on. Sometimes it's snowing. Sometimes you're boiling alive in July, choking on dust and sneezing into your elbow while mosquitoes swarm your face like they've been personally waiting for you all winter. You try to swat one, hit yourself in the eye, and keep going. Your only break? Sunday. But not always. If there's a storm coming, if the crop is late, if someone else got sick, congratulations. You're back in the field, wearing your one pair of shoes with holes in the toe. And guess what? You get to do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. You wouldn't last a day. Let's try something indoor next, like colonial candle making. Spoiler, it's still awful. South. You're done being cooked alive in the field. You decide to pivot to something calmer. Something that doesn't involve being elbow deep in dirt or burned by syrup. You make candles now, and within 5 minutes, you want to scream. First, let's talk about light. In colonial America, light is a luxury. There's no flicking on a switch, no soft glow from your phone screen, just darkness and fear and stubbed toes. So candles are a big deal. And your job? Make them. Lots of them. Without going completely insane. You start with tallow. If you've been paying attention, you already know what that is. Animal fat. Specifically, the greasy leftovers scraped from cows, sheep, or pigs. You render it down by boiling it slowly in a pot that smells like old meat and fresh suffering. The scent? Think soup. If the soup was made of despair and someone else's leftover stew meat, you melt the fat until it becomes a thick, bubbling sludge. Then you filter it through cheesecloth. But guess what? Your cheesecloth has holes, and you're out of clean rags. So you do your best and hope no one notices the hair. Now, for the wicks. You cut them by hand. You tie them. You hang them from a rod. You dip them into the pot one by one, over and over, until the wax builds up in slow, uneven coats. Diploma, cool. Diploma, cool. Diploma, cool. Each candle takes something like 30 dips. You do this for dozens. Hundreds. Your back aches from bending. Your arms ache from holding the rod. Your fingers cramp from tying knots in damp twine. You breathe in animal grease fumes all day. Your apron is covered in wax. Your shoes are slippery. The whole floor is a death trap of drips and broken candles. And that's just tallow. If you're lucky, very lucky, you get to work with beeswax. It smells better, burns cleaner, doesn't smoke as much. But it's expensive, so guess what? Only the rich get beeswax candles. You get tallow. All the time, forever. The tallow candles don't even smell nice when they burn. They smoke. They stink. They make the house smell like a butcher shop on fire. And they burn fast. So you're constantly replacing them, constantly making more. Winter is the worst. You make them inside, in the dark, with cold fingers and no ventilation. You burn your hand again. You accidentally drop one in the dirt. You have to start over. By the end of the day, your hair smells like grease. Your arms are sticky. You're lightheaded from the fumes. And your shirt sleeve caught on fire earlier, but you didn't say anything because what's even the point? You dream of the sun, but you wake up to more wax. You wouldn't last a day. But hey, maybe you want a job with a little more action. Let's talk about the local miller. It involves grain and slowly losing your will to live. South Tanner? Nope. Gravedigger? Nope. Field hand? Not this time. You work at the mill now. You're a miller, which sounds kind of peaceful, right? A water wheel spinning by the creek, birds chirping, flour bags stacked neatly like a Colonial bakery ad. Yeah. Number. Here's what actually happens. You wake up sneezing. Because everything, your bed, your clothes, your hair, is coated in flour dust. You sit up and cough out a cloud like a haunted sack of bread mix. You pull on the same work shirt you've worn all week. It's stiff with sweat, grime, and finely ground wheat particles that somehow manage to itch and suffocate you at the same time. You stomp out to the mill. It creaks. It moans. It leaks from all four corners. The air inside is hot, close, and permanently smells like wet wood and stale biscuits. The water wheel turns lazily out back, groaning every time the creek slows. Your job? Keep the grindstones going. Keep the grain flowing. Try not to get crushed. Simple. Unless something goes wrong, which it always does. You haul sacks of grain into the mill. Each one weighs more than you do. Your shoulders scream. Your knees threaten a rebellion. You climb rickety stairs with a 100-pound sack on your back while praying that the wood underneath your feet doesn't give out. You dump the grain into the hopper. Dust flies up and into your eyes, mouth, and soul. You blink. You spit. You keep going. The millstones spin. They grind the grain into flour, which also becomes airborne, which also ends up in your lungs, which also makes your nose bleed by Wednesday. You wear a rag over your face if you're lucky. If not, you just cough into the wall and keep moving. You check the gears. They're wooden, cranky. If something slips, you fix it, by hand, while it's still moving. You've seen what happens when someone's sleeve gets caught. It's not subtle. You make flour all day, every day, but you don't get to eat it. Most of it goes to merchants, or the local big house, or exported, or traded. You go home and eat boiled cornmeal that tastes like defeat and roof shingles. Sometimes the river floods. Sometimes the millstones jam. Sometimes the flour spoils. Guess whose fault it is? Yours. You stay up late trying to fix the gear teeth by candlelight which is fun because your fingers are already cracked and your knuckles are full of splinters and you haven't had a full night's sleep in 4 months. You wouldn't last a day. Still want another job? Cool. Let's try barber surgeon. 2 words that should never go together. Let's talk about your new job. You're a barber surgeon now, which is exactly what it sounds like. A strange, deeply unfortunate mix of haircutting, bleeding people, pulling teeth, and possibly killing someone by accident with a knife you just used to trim a man's sideburns. You wake up in the corner of your shop, which is also your house, which is also freezing. The window's iced over, the chamber pot is full and frozen solid, and you slept with a wool hat on because the fire went out sometime before midnight, and your toes feel like forgotten carrots in the root cellar. You sit up slowly, listening to your knees creak, then pull on your clothes, which are stiff with cold and dusted in flecks of someone else's dandruff. The apron you reach for is stained, with blood, probably. Could be yours. Could be yesterday's patient. You don't remember anymore. You tie it on and start boiling your tools in a pot of water on the hearth. Not because you believe in sterilization, that's a century or 2 away, but because hot knives just look more serious when you brandish them. Your shop has a striped pole outside, red for blood, white for bandages. You hang it up every morning, which is kind of your way of saying, "Hey, we've got blades and time. Come on in if something's leaking or loose." Your first visitor is a local farmer with an infected tooth the size of a walnut. He hasn't slept in 4 nights. His cheek is swollen like he's smuggling bread dough in it, and he smells like rot and despair. You nod, gesture to the chair, and begin the ancient dance of pretending this is going to be fine. You don't have anesthesia. What you have is a wooden handle, a metal hook, and a strong left arm. You tell him to bite on a leather strap. You count to 3. You lie and pull on 2. He screams. You grunt. The tooth snaps, but not cleanly. There's blood. There's panic. There's that moment where both of you stare at the dangling root and realize this is going to get much worse before it gets better. After that, it's time for a haircut. Someone's getting married, which means their cousin needs to look less like a barn accident and more like a person who owns a comb. You wipe the blood off your knife with your apron, switch to scissors, and try to ignore the smell of your own hands. You trim. You chat. You pretend the stool isn't wobbling because one leg broke in 1718 and you never got around to fixing it. You talk about the weather, the grain prices, the war. You try not to slice anyone's ear off while thinking about the abscess you still need to drain on the next patient. And then they come in. The bleeder. This one's a classic. Fever, rash. Some kind of imbalance of humors, which is the colonial way of saying, we don't know what this is, but we're about to make it worse. You pull out the bleeding bowl. You roll up their sleeve. You use a blade so dull it might as well be a spoon. You make a shallow cut and let the blood trickle. The patient swoons. You fan their face with your hat. Someone faints in the corner. You nod confidently, as if this is going to fix anything at all, and mop the floor with a rag that's already soaked from yesterday. You don't have Band-Aids. You don't have gloves. You don't even have soap half the time. You clean your tools by boiling them, wiping them with a cloth, or sometimes just setting them next to the fire until they stop looking suspicious. And then there's surgery, which, let's be clear, is never planned. It's always urgent. Someone fell. Someone got stabbed. Someone has something growing inside them that shouldn't be there. You get handed a body, a pan of hot water, and a room full of people shouting advice. You take your longest knife, the one that looks like it used to live in a pirate's boot, and you go to work. No one is quiet. The patient is awake. You cut. You dig. You shout over the screaming. You hope for the best. If they live, you get paid in eggs. If they die, you get blamed by their widow. By sundown, your sleeves are stiff, your hands are trembling, and you haven't sat down since breakfast, which was half a biscuit and a sip of cold ale that tasted like mold. You sit by the fire. You clean your tools again. You stare into the flames and try not to think about the man whose rib you cracked this morning just to get to his lung. And you fall asleep wondering how many of the people you treated today are still breathing. You wouldn't last a day. And that was the best case scenario for medicine. Next, let's talk about the guy who gets to clean the privy vaults. Yes, colonial America had toilets, just not for you. There is a special place in history for jobs so unpleasant, so soul-meltingly awful, that even other miserable people shake their heads and say, "That poor bastard." And that, tonight, is you. Because your job is to clean out the privy vaults, not use them, not build them, clean them, dig them, empty them, manage the literal human waste of an entire colonial settlement, using nothing but your hands, a bucket, a shovel, and a tolerance for horror that borders on divine punishment. You are the night soil man. Or if it's a smaller town, you're just the pit guy, the guy with the smell. You wake up long after everyone else has gone to bed because your work can't be done while the village is awake. People don't want to see it, don't want to think about it, don't want to know where it all goes once it disappears through the wooden plank hole under their thighs. But you know too well. You open the shed where your tools are kept, a long-handled spade, a pail with a dent in it, and a thick canvas apron that no longer has a color, just a general feeling of damp dread. You pull it on, knowing that by the end of the night it'll weigh twice as much. You don't ask questions anymore. You just do the job. The first stop is a wealthier house, one of those homes with a 2-seater outhouse behind the main building and cedar planks on the walls so they can feel fancy while doing their business. You knock. No one answers. You didn't expect them to. You pry open the door and take one long breath. Not because you enjoy it, but because you need one clean inhale before the stench hits you like a physical wall. It's not just bad. It's not just foul. It's layered. Rot, ammonia, fermented food, something sour that might have been meat, and something else. Something uniquely human and inescapably alive. You try not to gag, but sometimes you do. Sometimes it happens before you've even touched the shovel. You lift the seatboard and stare into the pit. It's full. Again. Because no one ever thinks to stop eating. And now it's your job to scoop it out, one sloshy heap at a time, into your bucket. Sometimes it's wet. Sometimes it's dry. Sometimes you hit something solid that you don't want to identify. You keep going, bucket after bucket. The weight is unreal. Your arms ache. Your back locks up. And no matter how careful you are, it always splashes. Always. Just a little. Enough to ruin your boots. Enough to ruin your night. You carry the waste to the dumping site. A hole you dug outside of town in a clearing no one visits anymore because the ground there will never be the same. You pour it out, watching the slow cascade of sludge and chunks slither down the pile like a foul waterfall. You wipe your forehead with your sleeve and immediately regret it. You swat at the flies. You cough. You feel your soul try to leave your body, but it's too weighed down by the stink to escape. This is your whole night, house to house, pit to pit. You're invisible to everyone unless you forget to do your job, in which case, suddenly, everyone knows your name. You're the punchline to their jokes, the thing they warn their kids not to become, the person they cross the street to avoid during daylight hours. You try not to take it personally, but it wears on you, like the smell, which, by the way, never leaves. You've washed with lye, with vinegar, with boiling water. You've buried clothes. You've burned boots. Nothing works. It clings. It seeps. You smell it on your hands even when you're not working, even in your dreams. You get home before dawn. You strip your clothes off outside, hang them on a fence post that already looks like a crime scene, and step into your one-room shack where even the rats wrinkle their noses at you. You sit down by the fire and rub your hands. You're too tired to eat, too tired to cry. You just sit there, breathing through your mouth, knowing that in 24 hours, you'll do it all again. You wouldn't last a day, but you're still not at the bottom yet, because there's one more job that no one ever talks about. Not because it's rare, but because it's too common, too necessary, and somehow still worse than everything you've done so far. Let's talk about water hauling and the quiet misery of carrying survival one bucket at a time. Water. You'd think it would be simple. You open a tap, it comes out. Cold if you want it, warm if you wait. A miracle so ordinary you barely notice it anymore. But here, in colonial America, water is a job. A full-time, daily, back-breaking, shoulder-ruining job. And now it's your job. You are the one who hauls it. From the stream, or the well, or the rain barrel, depending on what the season is and how cruel the weather feels that week. You wake up and the first thought in your mind isn't, "What's for breakfast?" It's, "How far will I have to walk today just to not die of thirst?" You wrap a shawl over your shoulders because the morning air is cold enough to sting. You grab 2 wooden buckets with rope handles that chew into your palms every time you lift them. They're not empty for long, but the longer they're full, the more your arms tremble, the more your back curves, the more you start to understand why old people in town look like they were folded in half by regret. The path to the well is familiar and miserable. It's muddy in spring, frozen in winter, dusty in summer, and always full of things to trip over. Rocks, roots, your own thoughts. You get to the well, lower the rope, hear the bucket hit the water, feel the weight increase with a sickening tug. And then you pull, hand over hand. The rope is rough. You've got calluses, but they still crack open in the cold. You wince, but keep pulling. The full bucket emerges like some sad trophy you didn't ask for, and you pour it carefully into your own container, spill some on your shoes, and mentally calculate how many more trips you need to make before anyone in your house can so much as wash their face. You walk back slowly. The buckets swing, no matter how hard you try to keep them steady. One sloshes. Your boot gets soaked. That's going to be fun in January when it freezes solid around your foot. You trudge on. You can't go faster, and you definitely can't stop. Because this isn't just for drinking, it's for cooking, washing dishes, scrubbing floors, doing laundry, putting out fires, watering livestock, cleaning wounds, and maybe, if there's enough left, for you to splash your own face with once before bed. If someone in the house is sick, double it. If someone has a baby, triple. If your neighbor comes over because their barrel is dry, well, now it's a whole event. The worst part isn't the walking. It's knowing how quickly that water disappears. You bring it in, buckets full, feeling like a heroic mule that just dragged survival uphill. And 2 hours later, it's gone. Poured out into stew pots, soaked into rags, scrubbed over muddy boots. You blink, and it's like you never even went. So you go again. Every day, in every season, you walk with buckets in both hands until your arms go numb, your shoulders pinch, and the pain settles into your spine like a second skeleton. You don't complain. You can't. Because no one else wants the job. Because someone has to do it. Because water doesn't fetch itself. And in this world, survival doesn't knock politely. It sits in a wooden pail that weighs 30 pounds and tries to ruin your wrists. At night, you try to sleep, but your back throbs in a way that can't be stretched out. You lie on a straw mat that smells faintly of damp wool and old earth, and you stare at the ceiling beams wondering how much longer your body will hold out. You're not old, but your joints tell a different story. You wouldn't last a day, but before you drift off, let's squeeze in one more charming colonial profession. How about midwifery? Nothing says sleep well like trying to deliver a baby in a candlelit room with no sanitation and plenty of screaming. You are a midwife. Or more accurately, you are the midwife. There isn't a hospital nearby. There's no clinic, no nurse, no scrubs, no electricity, no epidurals, and definitely no one else in the neighborhood who knows what they're doing. There's just you, a bundle of linen cloths, a few worn tools, a bag of dried herbs that may or may not help with pain, and your hands, tired, cracked, overworked hands that are somehow the difference between life and death for the next woman who starts screaming. You don't get to sleep through the night. You don't get to plan your day. You go where the contractions are, and they don't wait. They don't care if it's pouring rain or if your feet are swollen from walking 10 miles yesterday. When someone starts laboring, you're summoned immediately. You grab your shawl, your satchel, your cracked lantern, and you go into the dark, into the cold, into someone else's home that smells like fear and wood smoke and the metallic edge of coming blood. The room is cramped. Always. The mattress is damp. The mother is sweating and wild-eyed. Her screams are sharp and raw, and they cut straight into the center of your chest. Because you've heard that sound before. You know what it can mean. You know how thin the line is between a long labor and a final one. The father paces or panics or disappears. Sometimes someone's grandmother is crying in the corner. Sometimes the woman is alone. You kneel beside her. You take her hand. You start talking. You talk a lot, actually, because words are sometimes all you have. There are no drugs to give her, no machines to monitor. Just your voice and your presence and your familiarity with how a woman's body pushes through something that should kill her but often doesn't. Not because of magic, but because of pure, unbearable force of will. You boil water. You wipe her forehead. You position her legs. You adjust the blankets. You press against her stomach to feel where the child is. You wait. You listen. You pray. And when the time comes, if the baby is positioned right, if the mother is strong enough, if there are no complications, you catch the child with your bare hands and try not to shake from the flood of adrenaline that comes every single time. But not every birth is kind. Sometimes the baby doesn't come head first. Sometimes it gets stuck. Sometimes the cord wraps twice around its neck. Sometimes there's too much blood. Sometimes there's not enough time. You don't scream. You can't. You do what you can. Turn the child with your fingers. Tilt the hips. Brace your knees into the floorboards while you try to save 2 lives with nothing more than instinct and bruised palms. and sometimes you fail. The room goes quiet. The mother weeps. The baby is still. And you're the one who has to close their eyes. You carry that every time. Because this isn't a job you walk away from. You don't punch out. You don't stop seeing their faces. You remember every name, every cry, every cold, small hand. You remember the ones who survived too. The babies you held up in the candlelight, covered in blood and vernix, who wailed like tiny gods and made everyone in the room sob from the sheer relief of it. You go home at sunrise. Your knees are raw. Your eyes sting. Your dress is soaked in someone else's sweat and life. You hang it up, you collapse, and then you wait. For the next knock, for the next scream, for the next desperate voice saying, "The baby's coming, please come quick." You wouldn't last a day. But hey, maybe you're more of a tradesperson, a cobbler perhaps. Let's talk about making shoes. Specifically, making shoes in a world where everyone walks through mud, no one pays on time, and you're one busted soul away from losing your income for a month. Now you're a cobbler. And no, not the dessert. You make shoes. By hand. With a knife that's never quite sharp enough, a workbench that creaks louder than the people walking across it, and a pair of eyes that went blurry 3 years ago from staring at soles and stitching for 18 hours a day in candlelight. You live and work in the same single-room structure. Your tools lined up along a shelf, your scraps scattered across the floor, and your patience worn thinner than the leather you keep trying to stretch into another pair of serviceable boots. It sounds simple, maybe even pleasant. You imagine yourself seated by a window, sunlight pouring in, a mug of something warm nearby, the gentle tap-tap of your hammer echoing off the wooden beams. But that version only exists in the paintings they'll make 2 centuries from now. Here in real life, you are hunched over a crooked bench with a numb spine and a cramp in your thumb that's lasted since last harvest. There is no sunlight. The shutters are shut tight against the wind and the smell. There is no mug, just a cracked bowl of brine and a flask of something bitter you swore you'd stop drinking, but didn't. Your customers are everyone, because everyone needs shoes. But your customers are also no one, because no one wants to pay what shoes actually cost. They show up at your door, muddy, loud, and holding boots that are less footwear and more cloth bags nailed to a dream. They want you to fix holes the size of your fist. They want new soles from scraps. They want stitching that will survive the spring floods. And they want it by the morning, paid in soup and promises. You say yes, because you can't say no. Because saying no means they'll go to the other guy. The one in town who cobbles faster but cheaper, who cuts corners, who doesn't care about quality. Or worse, they'll just go barefoot and tell everyone that shoes are for snobs, and now you're the stuck-up cobbler who charges real prices. So you patch, you cut, you stitch, you hammer, you bend over a pair of worn-out boots that have already buried 2 generations of toes. You try to stretch cracked leather around a warped last. You use twine when thread runs out. You reinforce heels with old wood that splinters if you so much as breathe too hard. Every time your needle slips, it bites your thumb. Every time your awl breaks, you swear under your breath and sharpen it again on the stone you've worn down to the size of a baby's tooth. And then there's the smell. The hides, the oil, the sweat soaked into the fabric, the mice nesting in the spare cloth in the corner, the damp rot that creeps up from the floor every time the river rises. You breathe through your mouth. It doesn't help. You spend entire days shaping one pair of shoes for a person who may not even come back. You craft carefully. Not because they'll thank you, but because you can't bring yourself to do a bad job. You lace them, polish them, set them aside, and then someone comes in and asks if you can make a second pair, but for cheaper. They squint at your work like you forged it in 2 hours instead of 16. You don't argue. You nod. You say, "I'll see what I can do." You sleep in your work clothes because you're too tired to take them off. You dream about thread snapping, about soles pulling away from the heel, about someone demanding a refund for boots they ruined while slogging through a marsh at midnight. You wouldn't last a day. And yes, even though it's quieter than digging graves or hauling sewage, this job will grind you down in silence until your fingers twitch in your sleep and your knees ache every time you hear the word leather. Maybe you want something even more practical now. Let's try blacksmithing. Just you, a hammer, an anvil, a roaring fire, and an endless line of people who think you're both invincible and free. So now you're a blacksmith, which at first glance sounds kind of cool, right? You think of hammers, sparks, muscles, the rhythmic clang of hot iron on steel. People relying on you to make horseshoes and nails, and those big iron hinges that keep barn doors from flying off in a storm. Maybe you imagine a leather apron, arms like tree trunks, a glow from the forge lighting up your chiseled colonial jawline. You think strength, independence, respect. But no, you're tired. You're always tired, and your skin is never clean again. You wake up on a cot that smells like coal dust and old sweat. Your fingers already curled from sleeping in the same clawed position you hold the tongs in every day. Your shoulder pops when you sit up. Your back cracks. You rub your eyes, and the first thing under your nails is soot. You haven't had a clean fingernail since you were 15. You don't eat breakfast. You chew on something that used to be bread, swig lukewarm water, and wipe your mouth with a sleeve already stained with ash and grease. Then you walk to the forge. It's less a building and more a heat trap with a roof. You've lost count of how many times your eyebrows have almost burned off. The fire never really goes out. You bank it at night and coax it back in the morning. You pump the bellows until your arms ache. You feed it charcoal or coke or whatever you've got, and the flames roar back like a dragon waking up angry. The heat hits you hard, like opening an oven door with your face. Your whole body starts sweating within seconds, even in January. In summer, it feels like you're standing inside someone's lungs during a fever. You wear a leather apron that's already cracked and stiff. Your shirt clings to your back. Your boots stick to the dirt floor, which is half mud and half molten metal flakes that melted themselves into the earth years ago. Then the customers show up. They always need something. They never give you time. One wants a hinge, another wants a nail. One guy wants a plow blade sharpened before sundown because a storm's coming. Someone else broke their kitchen knife in half by doing something stupid, and now they want it fixed for 2 chickens and a smile. You try to work quickly, but nothing in blacksmithing is fast unless you want it to be bad. You heat the iron until it's red. Then you hammer, and hammer, and hammer. The sparks fly up and catch your beard. The noise rings in your ears so long you don't hear normal conversation anymore. You strike and turn and strike again until your shoulder feels like it's tearing away from the bone. Your hands blister even though they're calloused. Your elbows ache. Your back gets tight from hours bent over the anvil. You get burned at least twice a day. From metal that looked cool but wasn't. From the tongs that slipped. From the forge wall when you weren't paying attention. There's a scar running across your forearm shaped like a horseshoe nail. There's another one on your wrist that looks like a question mark, which feels appropriate. Horses show up with cracked shoes. You hate horses. They don't listen. They kick. They smell worse than your forge. You try to calm them while lifting their hoof, balancing a 1,000-pound animal on 3 legs while holding the shoe in place with your thigh and a mouth full of curses. If the horse shifts, you get kicked. If the horse panics, you get trampled. And even when the work's done, even when the shape is right, the fit is snug, the blade is sharp, and the tool is true, they still complain. It's heavier than the last one. The grip feels different. Why does it cost so much? Because you made it by hand. Because your sweat is in the handle. Because your lungs are full of black dust and your eardrums hum even when it's silent. Because your fingers don't bend properly anymore and your knuckles crack every time you close your fist. But they don't care. They leave with what they wanted and promise to pay later. Or forget to. Or trade you a jar of honey that smells like wax and tastes like regret. You wipe your face. You scrub your hands. You sit by the fire you built and think about how strange it is to be cold and hot at the same time. You wouldn't last a day, and yet there's still someone lower on the ladder than you. Let's talk about indentured servants, or more specifically, being one. You don't get paid. You don't get freedom. You don't get much of anything, except exhaustion. Now you're not a cobbler, not a blacksmith, not even a midwife. You're an indentured servant, which is basically a colonial way of saying you work for free, eat what they give you, sleep where they tell you, and pray, really pray, that you survive long enough to see your contract end. If it ends, if they honor it, if you don't die of illness, exposure, or just despair. See, this all started with a deal, a promise. Maybe you were in Europe. Maybe you were poor, starving, young, desperate. Maybe someone said, "Hey, there's land in the New World, a better life. You just sign here, agree to 7 years of labor, and in return we'll pay for your passage across the ocean." It sounded fair at the time. You were 17, or 15, or 12. You couldn't read all the words, but you understood hope. And that's what they sold you, hope, for a fresh start. But hope doesn't build fences or scrub floors. You do. You get off the boat thinner than when you boarded. You haven't eaten properly in weeks. Your skin is pale. Your hair is brittle. You smell like mold and salt and vomit. A man meets you at the dock. Not a kind man. Not the one who made you the promise. Just someone who bought your contract. He looks at your arms, checks your teeth, and loads you into a wagon like a sack of cornmeal. You don't even know his name. He brings you to his homestead. It's nothing like what you imagined. It's smaller, colder. You don't get your own room. You get the loft, if you're lucky. Or the corner of the barn. Or the floor of the kitchen near the ashes, where rats scurry past your face at night. There's no bed, just a wool blanket and a pile of straw that smells like it gave up months ago. Your job? Everything. You chop wood, carry water, milk the animals, slaughter the chickens, weed the garden, cook the meals, clean the ashes, fix the fence, haul stones, dig ditches, scrub clothes, tend the fire, feed the dog, catch the pig, hold the baby, stay awake, stay working, stay quiet. If you mess up, if you burn the porridge or break a bucket or trip and spill the milk, you get punished. Not scolded. Punished. Maybe they dock your food. Maybe they add months to your contract. maybe they hit you. You learn quickly how to nod without speaking, how to work without thinking, how to swallow anger so deep it turns into something cold and permanent inside you. You eat whatever's left over, bread that's mostly crust, meat that's mostly bone, soup that's mostly water. You eat fast because if you're too slow, someone else takes it. You learn to ignore hunger. You stop noticing the ache. It's just part of you now. You wear the same clothes every day. They don't fit. They don't warm you. They don't belong to you. You try to patch the holes with thread you borrow from the sewing basket, hoping no one notices. You wash them once a week in a river so cold your hands go numb halfway through. You hang them on a bush to dry. They freeze. You wear them anyway. Sometimes at night you dream about going home. Then you remember, you can't. There is no home anymore. This is your life, for 5 more years, or 6 or 7. You can't keep count. You stopped trying. You measure time in seasons now. How many times the snow has fallen. How many summers your skin peeled from the sun. How many springs you woke up with bug bites in places you didn't think bugs could reach. Some days, someone dies. A neighbor, another servant, maybe someone who was almost done. You stare at the body and wonder what they felt in their final hour. Relief, regret. You don't cry. You can't afford to. It takes too much out of you. You work, and work, and work, because that's the only thing keeping you alive. You wouldn't last a day. But then again, most people didn't. Now let's shift to something else, something colder, something lonelier. Let's talk about trapper life. You, the forest, and the bone-deep silence of a winter that doesn't care if you live or die. You're a trapper now, which means you don't wake up in a bed. You wake up on the frozen ground inside a 3-sided shelter made from logs, mud, and whatever animal hides you could stitch together before the first snow hit. There's a fire, or at least the ghosts of one. The coals are black, the smoke has long since disappeared into the trees, and your breath fogs the air like your body's still arguing with death about whose turn it is to take you. You sit up, bones cracking like frozen sticks, and shake the ice out of your beard. You've been out here for days, weeks, months maybe. Time gets weird when you spend most of it alone in a silence so complete you hear your heartbeat in your teeth. You trap animals. That's your job. You lay snares. You bait pits. You set iron jaws in the underbrush and hope something furry and valuable walks straight into a cold steel surprise. You don't do it for fun. You do it because someone back east wants beaver pelts, or fox, or mink, or otter. They wear them as hats and coats and muffs while sipping tea by a fire, never wondering who had to drag a skinned carcass 40 miles through ice and pine needles just so they could be a little warmer. That person is you. You haven't seen another human face in days. You talk to the trees sometimes, or the fire, or your own hands, just to prove they still work. You move slowly in the morning because the cold turns every movement into something dangerous. If you slip, you break your wrist. If you break your wrist, you can't set traps. If you can't set traps, you can't eat. So you don't slip. You don't rush. You move like someone walking across a frozen lake that's already cracked beneath your feet. The trail is quiet, always. The only sounds are the crunch of snow beneath your boots and the wind sliding through the branches like it's looking for something it lost. You check the first trap. Empty. The second, sprung, but nothing inside. The third, jackpot. A beaver. Caught at the leg. It's dead, which is better. You've had to kill some by hand before, and the way they scream stays with you. You kneel. Your knees go numb instantly. You pry the trap open. Blood smears your gloves. You tie the body to your belt with a cord and keep walking. You check 20 traps. If you're lucky, 5 hold something useful. If you're unlucky, they hold something rotten, or torn, or nothing at all. Sometimes another predator got there first. Sometimes the animal chewed through its own leg to escape. You don't blame them. You've thought about doing the same more than once. At night, you eat what you can. Sometimes salted meat. Sometimes jerky so hard you chip a tooth. Sometimes rabbit if you're lucky. Boiled in a pot with pine needles and whatever roots you managed to dig up before the ground turned to stone. You drink snowmelt. You melt it in a tin cup over the fire, blow the ash out, sip carefully so your cracked lips don't split again. You write in a little book sometimes, not for posterity, just to prove to yourself that you're still a person, that you still remember letters. The solitude is the hardest part, not the cold, not the hunger, not even the wolves. It's being forgotten. Knowing that no one knows where you are, that if you died tonight, froze in your sleep, fell into a crevasse, got caught in a storm and buried, the world would keep spinning. No one would come looking. Your pelts would go uncollected. Your name wouldn't be spoken again. You think about that more than you should. You wouldn't last a day. But if you did, if you made it out, if you brought back enough hides to trade, then congratulations. You get to go back into town for a week, get cheated by the trading post, and then disappear again into the forest. Unless you want to switch to something even more fun. Let's try brickmaking. The joy of mud, fire, and slowly cooking yourself from the inside out. You're a brickmaker now, which means you spend your days covered in mud, sweat, and a deep, aching weariness that seeps all the way down to the bones you haven't broken yet. You don't have a workshop. You have a field. You don't have tools. You have your hands, and maybe a shovel with a splintered handle that chews at your palms like it's personally offended you. There are no machines, no conveyor belts, just you, the earth, and a long list of things that need to get built. Houses, chimneys, walls, smokehouses, fireplaces, barns, and anything else people expect to stand up and not collapse when it rains. They don't care how it gets done. They just want it ready by the time the sun sets. You start in the pit, a deep one, dug with your own hands, filled with thick red clay that clings to your boots and won't let go. You dig it out in lumps, then mix it, slowly, painfully, with sand, straw, and water, stomping it with your feet like a human pestle, sloshing through the sticky mess like you're trying to fight your way out of the world's saddest swamp. Your legs ache. Your calves throb. Your lower back starts screaming sometime before noon, but you keep going because the job isn't done until you've filled the molds. The molds are wooden, hand-carved, worn slick with use and warped from the last time you left them out in the rain. You pack them with the wet mix, press it in hard, smooth the top with a bit of wood, or your hand or whatever's closest. Then you flip the whole thing over and hope it holds its shape. You line them up in the sun, dozens, hundreds, all waiting to dry just enough before the next step. And God help you if it rains. You check the sky constantly, not because you're worried about getting wet. That's a given. But because one surprise downpour can destroy a full day's work in minutes, turn neat rows of drying bricks into puddles of sad, lumpy regret. You can try to cover them with straw, but the wind's never on your side. It pulls at your coverings like it's laughing. Once they're dry enough to move, you carry them, one at a time, two if you're feeling stupid, to the kiln, a hand-built monstrosity of stone and fire where the real nightmare begins. You stack the bricks carefully, like you're building a house you'll never live in. Then you fire up the kiln and wait and sweat. The heat is unreal, not like the sun. Worse, the kind of heat that makes your lungs feel like they're shrinking inside your chest, that makes your eyebrows curl and your boots melt just a little bit every hour. You rotate the bricks with a long stick. You listen to the crackle. You try not to breathe too deep because the smoke stings. You try not to stand still too long because your skin starts to itch from the inside out. Sometimes the bricks explode. Too much moisture, a bad mold, air pockets. Doesn't matter. They shatter with a sound like a curse, flinging hot shards everywhere. One hit your hand once, took a chunk out, bled for hours. You wrapped it with a strip of shirt and kept working, because no one's going to do it for you. You work all day, every day, from sunup to sundown, and then sometimes past that if someone's building something important and you're behind. Your arms are thick with grime. Your fingers are calloused, split, blistered, and raw. You've inhaled so much dust, your nose bleeds randomly now. You don't even notice anymore. You fall asleep on your back, sore in places you didn't know could hurt, smelling like damp earth and singed hair, and when you close your eyes, all you see is clay. You wouldn't last a day, but then again, there's always one more job waiting, one more rung lower on the ladder. And this next one? Let's talk about candle making. Yes, candles. The soft glow of comfort in modern life. Except this version involves boiling animal fat until your house smells like the inside of a dead cow's throat. You're a candle maker now, which sounds cozy, doesn't it? Warm light, gentle flames, a little colonial cottage with soft beeswax and tidy rows of hand-dipped tapers, flickering in a windowsill next to a loaf of fresh bread. Maybe there's a cat. Maybe you hum. Yeah, that's not your life. You don't get beeswax. You don't get fresh bread. You don't get to hum. You get tallow. And tallow is fat. Old, clotted cow or sheep fat, scraped from bones and offal, stuffed into buckets, and left to sit until it's ready, which is a nice way of saying almost rancid, but not yet crawling with visible maggots. You don't work in a clean workshop. You work near a fire that never goes out, inside a room that always stinks. The smell isn't just bad, it's permanent. It's a thick, oily cloud that sticks to your clothes, your skin, your hair, and your sense of self-worth. First, you render. You dump the raw chunks of fat into a big iron pot and melt it down over an open flame. It sizzles, it bubbles, it pops, it spits, and it smells like death, like wet leather and sour broth and barnyard floor. You stir it slowly, trying not to inhale too deeply. You sweat, you cough, you gag. The windows fog up, and the flies come in. They love this job. You do not. Then, once the tallow is hot and liquid and vaguely golden, you strain it, through a cloth or a sieve, or your sleeve if that's all you've got. You pour it into another pot. You let it sit. And while it sits, you get your wicks, usually just bits of cotton string or twisted flax. You tie them to a rod, line them up in pairs, and then dip. Over and over and over. Dip the wick in the tallow, pull it out, let it cool, dip again and again, layer by layer, each candle forming slowly, unevenly, clumsily, with little globs and ridges and drips that you smooth with your fingers, unless it's too hot, in which case you burn yourself and pretend it didn't happen. There's no glamour here, no peace, just repetition, heat, soot, fat. You stand over the fire so long your clothes smell like they've been boiled. Your hands are always slick. Your eyes sting. Your back bends from hours of dipping and hanging, dipping and hanging, dipping and hanging again. And you do it for hours, days, weeks. You stack the finished candles in crates or hang them from the rafters, where they drip slowly in the heat and attract every hungry animal within a 5-mile radius. You've seen raccoons break into your storage just to gnaw on half-finished tapers like they're candied meat sticks. You've had dogs try to eat the cooling wicks. You've chased off more flies than you can count, and more than once, you've found one inside the wax, legs frozen in place. A tiny, fossilized scream you just have to live with. And for what? So someone can burn it for 3 hours during dinner and forget you exist. So a merchant can buy a dozen for less than it cost you to make half that. So your house can permanently reek of boiling carcass and warm lard, no matter how many herbs you hang in the window or how many windows you break trying to air it out. You go to bed exhausted, greased, and half blind from squinting at flickering flames. Your hands are raw, your neck's gone stiff, and the smell, it crawls into your dreams. You wouldn't last a day, but don't worry, we're not done. Because next up, let's talk about chimney sweeping. You, the soot, a broom, and the dark, narrow shaft that's just wide enough to climb into, but not always wide enough to climb out of. You're a chimney sweep now, which, in theory, doesn't sound so bad. People need clean chimneys. You clean chimneys. End of story, right? Except, here's the real story. You're climbing inside the black throat of someone else's house. It's barely wide enough for your shoulders. You can't see, you can't breathe, and when you're halfway up and your foot slips, you don't fall. You wedge, like a cork, like a tombstone, like a body-shaped plug in a soot-filled pipe. You don't choose this job. You get shoved into it. Usually young, usually small. You've got skinny arms, narrow hips, and the kind of wiry frame that fits in places not meant for humans. You're not an apprentice. You're a tool, a broom with bones. You get told where to go, what to bring, and how not to scream when the hot bricks burn your skin. You carry your brushes, a sack of rags, maybe a length of rope. You show up at the house, get handed a stale crust of bread, and get pointed toward the fireplace like someone tossing a rat into a hole. The fire's out, supposedly, but the stones are still warm. Sometimes they light it too soon, to test the draft, they say, and you get a breath of smoke that hits you so fast your eyes water and your throat closes. You climb anyway, because there's no other option. Inside, it's pitch black, no light, no room, just you, the walls, and the creaking groan of your own heartbeat echoing in your head. You drag your body up brick by brick, inch by inch. Your knees scrape against sharp edges. Your elbows bang into corners. Your fingertips search blindly for ledges. Every motion fills your lungs with dust, thick, clinging dust, years of ash, tar, soot, and God knows what else people have been burning in their fireplaces for decades. You cough, you choke, you keep going. You use your brush to knock loose the clogs. Creosote, hardened sludge, fire waiting to happen. You scrape it off in chunks. It falls past your boots like black snow, landing on the hearth in a pile that smells like burnt bones and wet pipe. Sometimes you can't reach. Sometimes the buildup is so bad, You have to break it with your bare hands. You punch the walls. You dig in with your fingers. The soot slides into your mouth. You spit, and it's black. Your nose bleeds. You keep going. And then there are the moments when something moves. Birds, usually, or squirrels. Sometimes something worse, nesting, dying, rotting. You've seen bones. You've smelled decay so strong it made you retch into your shirt. You once felt something breathing, and you climbed out faster than you ever thought possible, legs shaking, heart sprinting, ears ringing with the whisper of something you can't unhear. You climb back down, coated in soot, head to toe. You look like a shadow that grew teeth. Your eyes are bloodshot. Your chest burns. Your clothes are ruined. You wash your hands, but they never get clean. Your nails are black. Your lungs wheeze. You haven't taken a deep breath in years. And you do it again the next day. And the next. And the next. Because people need their chimneys clean. And you need to eat. You wouldn't last a day. But before you collapse from claustrophobia and lung failure, let's switch gears. Let's talk about grave digging. Because nothing says peaceful colonial life like waking up early to dig a 6-foot hole for someone you met last week. You're a grave digger now, which means your days begin with death. Not your own, not yet, but close enough. Someone in the village dies of fever or age or infection or childbirth or a cough that turned ugly in the night, and the bell tolls. And when it does, all heads turn to you. You don't get to mourn. You don't ask questions. You get handed a name, a location, and a shovel. That's your job. To dig a hole deep enough, wide enough, and quiet enough to fit a body that no longer needs anything except space in the earth. You walk out early, before the others stir. The fog still clings to the grass like breath. The ground is hard, sometimes frozen, sometimes soaked, sometimes full of roots that claw at your blade like they don't want to let go. You dig anyway. You lean into the work. Your shoulders burn. Your hands blister. The first layer is always the easiest. But then you hit the clay, the rocks, the hard-packed history of every storm and drought and frost that came before today. It pushes back. You keep going. 6 feet down. Always 6. Unless they tell you different. Unless the person was small, or poor, or just a servant. Then it's 4, or 3, sometimes less. You don't decide. You just dig. The graveyard is quiet, but not peaceful. The wind never really stops. The crows watch you like they're waiting. You don't speak much when you work. Not because you're reverent, just because you're tired. The shovel hits stone. You twist your wrist. You dig it out. You mutter. You spit. You wipe your forehead on a sleeve already soaked with sweat. No one thanks you. You finish the hole by midday if you're lucky. You climb out. You stretch your back and feel every vertebra argue with your spine. You drink water from a tin cup and it tastes like dirt. Because everything tastes like dirt now. They bring the body wrapped in cloth. Sometimes in a box. Usually not. You help lower it in. You hold one end of the rope and try not to slip. Sometimes the rope breaks. Sometimes the box splits. You've seen worse. You've smelled worse. A week-old corpse in July is something you never forget. Once they're in, you cover them up. Slowly. Carefully. You know better than to rush this part. The families watch. The priest mumbles. The dirt falls with a sound that gets into your ears and stays there long after the service ends. You pat it down with the back of your shovel. You mark the spot with a stone or a cross or nothing at all. Then you go home. or back to the next one, because someone else will die soon. Always. Always. At night, you scrub your hands raw. You sit by a fire that doesn't feel warm anymore. You sleep with your back sore and your mind heavy. You dream of holes, endless holes, one of them for you. You wouldn't last a day. But we're still not done, because there's one more job waiting in the shadows. Let's talk about the town watch. A lantern, a stick, and the thankless task of staying awake all night while everyone else gets to forget how dangerous the dark can be. Now you're the town watch, which means you don't sleep when the others do. You don't rest when the hearths go cold and the candles gutter out. You walk, slowly, in circles, with a lantern in one hand, a wooden club in the other, and a head full of dread about what might be waiting just around the corner. You are the first line of defense against thieves, drunks, fires, wild animals, and human stupidity. And there's no second line. You didn't choose this job because you wanted it. No one does. Maybe you owed someone a favor. Maybe you got arrested once, and the magistrate decided your sentence should involve staying up for the rest of your life. Or maybe you're just the kind of unlucky soul who doesn't flinch when the shadows move. You walk the perimeter, past the same crooked fences, the same sagging doors, the same shuttered windows that all look like blank, closed eyes. It's quiet, but not peaceful. Never peaceful. There's the rustle of rats in the hay, the scrape of branches against wood, the distant hoot of an owl. Or was that something else? You stop. You hold your breath. You wait. Nothing. You keep walking. It's cold, always, even in summer. The night air has teeth, and it sinks into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. Your boots crunch on gravel. Your breath clouds in front of your face. You shift your grip on the lantern as the oil sputters low. You're supposed to check every alley, every stable, every crooked corner where someone might try to slip through unnoticed. And you do. Because if you don't, something always happens. A barn catches fire. A drunk stumbles into a well. A thief takes everything not nailed down and vanishes into the brush before sunrise. And when that happens, it's your fault. You didn't see it. You weren't fast enough. You were asleep, weren't you? You weren't. You swear you weren't. But you're tired. So tired. There's nothing natural about staying alert when your whole body wants to shut down. Your eyelids droop. Your knees wobble. You lean on a fence post for just a second, and the next thing you know, the stars have shifted and your hand is numb from the cold. You walk faster, slap your cheeks, whisper curses into the dark, anything to stay conscious. Sometimes you run into people. That's worse. Drunks who think you're a demon. Angry husbands with bleeding knuckles. Young idiots with knives. You try to talk them down. You try not to escalate. But you never know what they're carrying. You never know what they've had to drink. You never know if this is the night your job stops being thankless and becomes fatal. You're not allowed to carry a real weapon, just a stick, a lantern, and a whistle no one hears until it's too late. Your shift ends at dawn, supposedly, if someone shows up to relieve you, if no one else is sick, if the morning comes at all. Some nights stretch on forever. You watch the horizon like it owes you something, like the sun might forget you. When you finally stumble home, the world is already awake again. Children screaming, livestock braying, smoke curling from chimneys you just passed an hour ago. No one thanks you. No one remembers. They just nod vaguely, say something about how quiet the night was, and ask if you saw the raccoons near the bakery. You say yes. You always say yes, even if you didn't, even if you missed it, even if your memory is a blur of lantern light and frost. You sleep during the day, or try to, but people bang on doors, and chickens scream, and your window doesn't close right. You close your eyes anyway. You count the hours until nightfall. You start all over again. You wouldn't last a day, and you're starting to wonder if you will. But let's take a break from the cold and step into the kitchen. Because someone has to cook for all these people. Someone has to feed the family. Someone has to stand next to a fire that never goes out and prepare meals with zero seasoning, zero refrigeration, and a whole lot of judgment. You guessed it. Next, you're the Colonial cook. You're the cook now, which means your day doesn't start when the sun rises. It starts before. You're up in the dark, rubbing your eyes with the back of your hand, fumbling through layers of smoke-stained clothing while your breath fogs in the air. Your fingers are already stiff before they touch a single spoon. You move through the kitchen like a ghost, not because you want to be quiet, but because you've learned the hard way that stomping in a Colonial kitchen is a fast track to burning your hand, spilling something hot, or knocking your hip into the sharp corner of a table that's already gouged your thigh 5 times this week. The hearth is cold. You fix that first. You kneel, knees cracking, back groaning, and blow life into the ash like you're begging. If you're lucky, the embers wake up. If not, you start over. Splinters under your fingernails, hands black with soot, praying the kindling catches before your breath gives out. You light the fire. You sweat immediately. And you stay sweating for the rest of the day. You cook 3 meals every day for every person in the household and possibly their guests and their workers and anyone else who shows up looking vaguely hungry. Breakfast is porridge, always porridge, sometimes cornmeal, sometimes oats. If there's milk, it's probably sour. If there's molasses, it's a good day. Most days, there's just salt, and not even the good kind. You serve it hot, steaming, thick enough to glue your spoon to the bowl, and pray no one complains. Then, it's time for dinner prep, which you have to start before breakfast is even done. You boil water. You gut a chicken that looks more feather than meat. You pick weevils out of the flour. You chase a rat off the shelf and wonder how long it's been nibbling at the dried peas. You cut vegetables so wilted you can't tell if they're still edible or just clinging to the idea of being food. You stir pots with a wooden spoon that has seen things. You taste stew with a scorched tongue. You sweat so much you stop noticing it. Your apron is a battlefield. Grease splatter, flour dust, a mysterious red spot from 2 days ago you've decided to stop thinking about. The floor is always sticky. The air is always smoky, and every surface burns you if you touch it for more than half a second. You cook everything over flame. Open, unpredictable, angry flame. You can't adjust the heat. You can't set a timer. You watch. You listen. You guess. And if you guess wrong, the pie burns. The bread collapses. The roast dries out. And someone glares at you like you personally insulted their lineage. There are no leftovers. You don't get a break. You eat while standing. Cold bites between chores. A hard biscuit dipped in the drippings. A spoonful of stew if there's any left. You clean as you go, except nothing really gets clean. You scrub the pots with sand. You wash knives with hot water and prayer. You swat at flies, then try not to think about how many you didn't catch. You cook through summer in a kitchen that feels like the inside of a sweating barrel. You cook through winter, with numb fingers and frost creeping across the windows, trying not to slip on ice as you haul in buckets of water. You cook through sickness, exhaustion, grief. The kitchen doesn't care how you feel. The fire doesn't care if your hands shake. And if someone gets sick, from undercooked meat, or spoiled milk, or bad water, guess who they blame? Not the ingredients, not the storage, not the complete lack of sanitation or science. You, the cook. You wipe your forehead. You taste the salt on your lip, and you don't know if it's sweat or tears. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of things that smell like death, let's step outside. Next up, outhouse duty. Because yes, someone has to dig the pit, clean the seat, and dump the waste. Welcome to the most forgettable and unforgettable job in town. You're on outhouse duty? No, not once. Not for a prank. Not because you lost a bet. This is your job, your daily reality. You wake up each morning and tend to the one thing nobody wants to talk about. What happens after everyone else eats, drinks, and digests? You are the keeper of the pit, the master of the latrine, the person whose existence reminds everyone that yes, things do go somewhere when you pull up your homespun wool trousers and walk away. You don't work inside a house. You work outside, behind it, past the woodpile, past the chickens, past the point where the smell becomes normal again. You approach your workplace with a shovel in one hand, a bucket in the other, and a deeply practiced ability to breathe through your mouth without gagging. You are responsible for digging the pit, lining the pit, maintaining the pit, and emptying the pit when it gets full, which, during a hot week or a family gathering, happens faster than you'd think. You start by checking the seat. Wooden, splintered, slightly damp. You hope that's just from rain. You swat away a cloud of flies. They're always there, a permanent audience. You know every buzzing wing personally at this point. You scrub the seat with vinegar, which does absolutely nothing except make the place smell like pickled manure. You remove any wasp nests, spider webs, or small dead animals from the corners. You poke the walls to check for rot. The door never quite latches, so you shove a stone in front of it to stop the wind, or worse, a raccoon, from barging in mid-use. Then comes the fun part. You lift the board, you brace yourself, you peek inside. It is never pleasant. In summer, it bubbles. In winter, it freezes. In spring, it overflows. In fall, it does all three. The stench is beyond description, somewhere between rotting cabbage and a haunted soup. You don't look too long. You grab your long-handled scoop, affectionately called the devil's ladle, and start transferring waste into your bucket. You wear gloves, but they don't help. Nothing helps. The bucket gets heavy fast, sloshing, warm. You carry it, carefully, steadily, to the dumping site, which is either a trench you dug last month or the cursed corner of the woods where even squirrels refuse to tread. You pour it out, rinse the bucket, and start again. You repeat this cycle until the pit is low enough, which is an estimate based entirely on how generous you feel that day. Once a year, or more often if you drew the short straw in life, you dig a new pit. Digging is hard. The ground fights you. Roots grab your shovel. The soil is dense, wet, and has no interest in being disturbed. You go 6 feet deep, minimum, and pray you don't hit bedrock, or bones, or whatever mystery someone buried long before you got here. You move the outhouse frame, plank by smelly plank, over the new pit. You cover the old one. Sort of. You sprinkle lime, if you have it. Ash, if you don't. Either way, it's still a biohazard with a wooden lid. You finish your day soaked in sweat, covered in specks of shame, and barely able to smell anything anymore. Which, in this line of work, might be a blessing. People avoid you. You get nicknames. They call you dung boy or pit dweller or worse. You learn not to take it personally. But every time someone wriggles their nose as you walk past, every time they mutter, "How can anyone do that job?" you remember something important. Someone has to. You wouldn't last a day. But don't worry. We're not out of jobs yet. Let's talk about the town crier. Because sure, yelling in public sounds easy, right? Until your voice gives out, your feet swell, and you realize half the things you shout are death notices. You're the town crier now. And no, that doesn't mean you cry. Not exactly. Though by the end of most days, you're pretty close. Your job is to speak for the town, to shout the news loud enough that every ear within walking distance hears it, remembers it, and ideally doesn't throw a rock at your head for interrupting their breakfast. You are the Colonial notification system, the walking newspaper, the original breaking news ticker, only with worse shoes and no punctuation. You wake up early because you have to memorize your announcements. Nobody gives you a script. You get handed a scrap of parchment, if you're lucky, with half-legible scrawl on it, written by someone who's never once worried about how you're going to yell, "A shipment of dried beans has arrived," with the same urgency as "Jonathan fell in the well again." You rehearse, you pace, you clear your throat, again and again, until your voice feels ready to be used like a club. Then you grab your bell. It's heavy, the handle's worn smooth from years of panicked shaking. You don't ring it gently. You ring it with purpose. A long, sharp clang that slices through fog, farm noise, and the arguments happening down by the blacksmith's shed. People know that sound. It makes them freeze. It makes them groan. It makes them wander out of doors to hear whatever fresh catastrophe you've been sent to scream about this time. You stand at corners, outside taverns, in front of churches. You shout, full voice, deep breath. You announce births, deaths, tax hikes, missing pigs, new laws, bad weather, marriage bans, grain shortages, runaway apprentices, and plague quarantines. Sometimes, all in the same hour. Your voice has to cut through every distraction. Livestock, hammering, crying babies, laughter, coughing, and still land like thunder in someone's ear. Your throat dries fast. You carry water, not enough. You try to save your voice by speaking slowly, but people heckle you when you take too long. They throw things, not always mean-spirited. Sometimes it's food. Sometimes it's a tomato. Sometimes it's just mud, thrown for the thrill of watching you flinch. You keep ringing your bell. Rain? You're out there. Snow? Still shouting? Summer heat? You sweat through 3 layers of wool and still bellow. Public meeting at dusk. All heads of household required. You're not loved. You're barely tolerated. You're loud, and people don't like loud. But they need you. They depend on you. When someone misses a meeting, they blame you. When someone gets fined for breaking a rule they never heard about, they claim you didn't shout it loud enough. You carry the weight of everyone's indifference like it's part of your uniform. You get no privacy. Everyone knows your name, even if you don't know theirs. They see you coming and groan. Children mimic your bell. Drunks try to outshout you for sport. You walk home hoarse, ears ringing from your own bell. feet aching from the same route every day, and you wonder if tomorrow will be the day you finally just don't. But then someone runs up, breathless, desperate. Did you hear what happened at the mill? Has anyone told the town yet? And just like that, you're back in it. You take the note. You clear your throat. You raise your bell. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of loud, miserable jobs, let's talk about colonial street sweeping. Because someone has to clear the muck, manure, vomit, and dead rats from the road before the preacher's wagon rolls through. And guess who gets to do it with nothing but a broom made of twigs? You're a street sweeper now, which means you wake up to the sound of hooves clopping through mud and manure, and you already know, before you've even sat up, that your first task of the day involves shoveling horse waste. Again, it's in the road. It's in the ditches. It's absolutely everywhere it shouldn't be. You can try to ignore it for a moment, breathe through your nose, pretend maybe someone else took care of it. But no, that's your job. That's your road now. And everyone's waiting for it to be clean enough to walk across without losing a shoe or a stomach. You don't have a fancy cart. You don't have gloves. You don't even have a real broom, just a bundle of stiff twigs tied to a splintered stick, which you jab and drag and swirl around like you're painting with the end of a tree. You start at one end of the main road and you walk, slowly, pushing piles of things you cannot name toward the ditches where they settle like a stew no one wants to claim. You clear trash, straw, mud, chicken feathers, bits of broken crockery, fish guts, rotten vegetables that didn't sell at the market and got tossed directly into the street, because apparently public sanitation is your entire personality now. You sweep around sleeping dogs, shouting toddlers, and carts that definitely should have been moved by now but aren't, because everyone assumes you will work around them. And you do. Because what choice do you have? The smell is a part of you now. It's in your hands, your boots, your hair. You get used to it. In the same way people get used to the cold or heartbreak. You stop flinching. You stop hoping. You just sweep. The broom breaks a little more every day. You patch it with more twigs. You break off branches from nearby trees when no one's looking. You've got a system. It's not good, but it works. Every so often, someone stops and thanks you. Not often. Usually only when they're trying to look charitable in front of a crowd, or they want to feel better about the coin they just tossed you. 1 copper penny, smudged with who knows what. You nod. You don't speak. There's muck in your teeth and a knot in your back, and you still haven't finished the West End. Rain makes your job worse. It turns the dust into slime, turns manure into soup, turns your work into a losing battle against the elements. People track it all back in anyway, but they still scowl if they slip, as if you personally invited the sky to pour down. In summer, the smell cooks. In winter, the filth freezes, just solid enough to trip over. Sometimes you have to break the frozen piles before you can move them. You do it with the end of your stick, muttering curses you didn't even realize you'd memorized. And when a parade rolls through, a wedding, a public sermon, that's your cue to make everything spotless, as if Colonial roads ever had a clean setting. You sweep until your wrists ache, until your hands are raw, until you forget what it feels like to stand without a stoop. And when it's finally done, you start again the next day, because people never stop dropping things, throwing things, spilling things, and livestock never learn manners. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of things being dumped where they don't belong, next up, let's talk about fulling. That's right. Cloth making, wool processing, the ancient art of stomping on soggy fabric in a vat of fermented urine for 10 hours straight. Yes, you heard that right. Fermented urine. Welcome to the Colonial laundry room. You're a fuller now, which means your job, your everyday job, is to take coarse, greasy wool cloth fresh off the loom and make it soft, tight, and weather-resistant by stomping on it in a giant wooden tub full of human pee. That's the secret ingredient. Not vinegar, not lye, not some colonial-era essential oil. No, it's urine. Old fermented reeking with ammonia pee, collected from chamber pots and piss buckets, and every friendly neighbor who donates to your vat like it's a community compost pile, except way, way warmer. You've got barrels of the stuff behind your shop, a line of sloshing containers waiting to be poured into the tub. Some of it's your own. Most of it's not. All of it is absolutely revolting. You strip down to your undershirt. You roll up your sleeves. You gag once because the smell never stops being a physical event. It hits you in the teeth, in the eyes, behind the knees. You lower yourself into the vat, 1 foot at a time, bracing against the rim like a man stepping into the worst spa in human history. The liquid is warm, always warm, and somehow slimy and sharp at the same time. You start to stomp, slowly, methodically, up and down, over and over, mashing the cloth beneath your feet like grapes at a cursed wine festival. Your job is to pound the fabric, compress it, work the fibers until the strands bind tighter, the weave shrinks, and the surface goes from scratchy barn rope to something almost wearable. It takes hours, 10, sometimes 12. You don't get a break because the cloth doesn't get a break. If you stop, it sets weird, uneven, useless. So you keep going. You shift your weight, turn in circles, stomp with your heels, bounce with your toes. Your legs cramp, your knees throb, your back spasms and your skin itches in places no bath will ever fix. The vat is inside a shed, dark, low-roofed, not well ventilated because why would it be? You breathe in the scent of sweat, wool oil, and uric acid until your sinuses feel like they're dissolving. The windows are fogged yellow. You try not to look too hard at the floating things. And then there's the sound. Sloshing, slapping, wet wool sucking against wet wood. It's awful, rhythmic, a noise that worms into your ears and lives there. Some nights, you hear it in your dreams. Some mornings, you wake up to the phantom feeling of cloth underfoot, even when you're barefoot on dry floor. When the wool is finally done, swollen, damp, and heavy, you drag it out with numb arms and hang it to dry. The cloth steams in the sunlight, releasing a mist that smells like someone boiled a sock inside a latrine. It takes a full day to dry. You don't touch it again until tomorrow. You wash your feet in a bucket of soap root and rainwater. Doesn't matter. The smell's still there. Your skin is red. The ammonia's eaten away half the calluses on your heels, but not evenly. You limp to bed and hope it doesn't rain tomorrow, because that means stomping twice as fast to beat the humidity. People love the finished cloth. They marvel at how soft it is, how warm, how water-resistant. They ask what makes it so different from the cheap stuff. You smile. You say, trade secret. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of things that are rough on your skin, next up, you're going into the woods. That's right. You're a colonial charcoal burner. You live in a hut. You watch a pile of slow-burning wood for a week straight. You try not to fall asleep or die of smoke inhalation. Also, someone else can heat their iron forge for a day and a half. You're a charcoal burner now, which means you live in a hut, not a house, not a cottage, a hut, in the forest, on the edge of town where no one can see you, smell you, or remember that you exist unless they need to heat something hot enough to melt iron. You've got a roof made of bark, a floor made of mud, and a bed that's mostly damp straw and raccoon footprints. There is no comfort here. There's only smoke and silence and the long, slow panic of knowing that if you mess up, the entire pile explodes and you have to start over. Charcoal doesn't make itself. It's not just burned wood. It's wood burned just right, slowly, without oxygen, in a controlled suffocation that turns logs into black gold. Fuel for the forges, the smithies, the gunpowder mixers, the people who do the loud jobs that everyone respects. But before they strike a hammer or load a musket, they need you. So you chop the wood, carefully. You haul it up the hill in bundles that bite your shoulders and scrape your thighs. You stack it in a perfect dome, thick logs in the middle, thinner ones around the outside. You plug the gaps with moss and clay. You cover the whole thing with dirt. You leave one hole at the top. That's your chimney. That's your breath hole. That's the eye of your beast. Then you light it. Not on top. Number. You dig a channel to the bottom and set a small, patient fire. You let it smolder, slowly, quietly. If it burns too hot, it turns to ash. If it burns too cold, it never transforms. You have to get it just right, and then you watch it for days. You don't leave. You can't. If the wind changes, if the hole collapses, if a log shifts the wrong way, it's over. You've wasted everything. So you stay, in your hut, on a stump, with your eyes on the dome and your hands wrapped around a bowl of something lukewarm and gray. You sleep in fits. You nap with one ear open. You check the smoke constantly. Is it white? Too white? Is it black? Too fast? Is it blue? What does blue mean again? You cough. Constantly. The smoke finds your lungs and refuses to leave. Your clothes reek. Your eyes water. Your fingers are always black, no matter how many times you scrub them with ash or sap or spit. You lose track of the days. You forget what your voice sounds like. You mutter things aloud just to remember you still exist. And when it's done, when the pile is cool, when the smoke thins, when the dome sinks, you dig it open, slowly, gently. You pull out the charcoal, light as air, dark as sin, fragile as dry leaves. You carry it in sacks, carefully. Every movement feels like a prayer. The blacksmith thanks you with a nod. The powder mill sends a cart. No one else even looks at you. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of things no one wants to touch, let's talk about tanning. Not sunbathing, not vacations, leather making, the colonial way. You get skins, you get brains, you get buckets of animal goo, and you get the job no one else wants, because it smells worse than death and takes a month to finish one hide. You're a tanner now, which means your life revolves around dead animals, but not in the way that earns you respect, or clean boots, or a solid night's sleep. No, your job begins after the kill, after the meat's been carved out, the bones picked over, the blood rinsed off. You don't get the dramatic moment with the musket or the warm roast on the fire. You get the hide, just the hide, raw, bloody, floppy, dragged across a stump and dumped at your door like a threat. And you know what comes next. You stretch it, scrape it, rub the fat off with a dull blade that's seen more guts than wood. Your arms ache. Your fingers blister. You're bent over in the same spot for hours, working in a rhythm so grim and repetitive it starts to feel like punishment. The smell is immediate. Rancid, wet, sour. It gets into your nostrils and stays there, curling up like a cat in your sinuses. But that's just step one. Because now you soak it. In urine, in lye, in animal brains, mashed into a chunky soup and stirred by hand, because apparently the only thing better at softening a deer hide than your own exhaustion is a bucket of fermented gray matter. You smear it on thick. You knead it in. You work the hide like dough. Only this dough has hair and screams in your dreams. You hang it to dry. You flip it. You stretch it. You scrape it again. Then you repeat. For days. For weeks. Sometimes longer, depending on the season. Sometimes the hides go sour and you have to bury them. Sometimes they attract flies the size of your thumbnail and you spend half your day swatting and spitting. Everyone in town knows what you do. Not because they've asked, but because they smell you before they see you. The stink of the tannery drifts like a curse. It clings to your clothes, your shoes, your hair. You could bathe in rose water every morning and still smell like old bacon by nightfall. You live at the edge of town, near the river, because you need water and because no one wants to live near you. The dogs avoid you. Children dare each other to run past your workshop. You're not hated, just omitted. Like a necessary paragraph in a book no one wants to read. But you keep going, because leather is needed for shoes, saddles, belts, bags, straps, armor. Every other job depends on what you make, even if they'd rather not know how it's made. So you keep stretching, scraping, softening, drying. At night, your hands are stained. Your nails are cracked. Your knuckles are raw. You try not to breathe too deeply as you close the workshop door behind you. You wash up, but it doesn't help. The smell's in your skin. Your dreams are full of hides. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of hideous jobs, let's take a walk through the mines. Because next up, you're going underground. And the only thing worse than the dark is what's waiting inside it. Yes, you're a sweep now, a child sweep. Because in colonial America, if you were under 4 feet tall and not actively on fire, congratulations, you had a career. You're a chimney sweep now, which is a fancy way of saying you're a soot-covered, underfed, permanently anxious ladder substitute. You don't own a broom. You are the broom. Your job is simple. Crawl inside a narrow vertical tunnel coated in several years' worth of smoke tar, burnt animal nests, and mystery soot, then somehow climb up using your knees, elbows, face, and raw desperation. Scrub the inside of the chimney clean as you go. Then hope gravity is kind when it's time to come back down. There is no training. There is no equipment. You are not handed gloves or goggles or a pleasant workplace orientation. You're handed a small bag of tools, half of which are just rocks tied to ropes, and you're pointed toward a fireplace with the words, "Don't get stuck." You lower yourself in. It's tight, unreasonably tight. Your shoulders scrape against brick. Your nose fills with ash before you're even a foot up. You cough once, then again. You hold your breath. You try not to gag. The chimney twists. It narrows. At one point you think, maybe this is the end. But then you push forward, because you can't exactly reverse. You can feel something alive wriggling near your ankle, but there's no time to panic. That's probably just a chimney beetle, or a rat, or a bat. You pick one and decide not to look. You scrape. You reach. You press your brush against the sides, dislodging flakes of soot that fall directly into your face. Your eyes sting. Your lungs burn. You're sweating in a tunnel that hasn't seen daylight since it was built. You can hear someone down below yelling, "You're almost there," which means you're not even halfway. Eventually, you emerge at the top like a coal-covered goblin being born out of a brick womb. You sit on the roof for a moment, coughing black phantoms into the air, wondering if it's always been this bright outside. You smell like a fireplace that caught the plague. You taste copper and soot. You spit, and the phlegm is gray. Then you climb back in. Down is worse. Gravity doesn't care about your bones. You slip once and get wedged sideways. You spend 2 full minutes convincing yourself not to scream. When you finally slide out the bottom like a sad chimney meatball, the homeowner claps politely and hands your master a coin. You don't get the coin. You get a half-stale biscuit and the chance to do it again tomorrow. Your knees are skinned. Your elbows are bruised. You haven't breathed clean air in weeks. But hey, people need their chimneys clean. The smoke has to go somewhere. And guess what? That somewhere is your lungs. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of things no one wants to clean, let's talk about being a night soil man. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. Buckets, streets, the worst job in the colonies, literally. You're a night soil man, which is the polite 18th century way of saying you haul human waste in the dead of night while everyone else is asleep and pretending you don't exist. You deal in the kind of material that no one talks about, but everyone produces. You're essential, indispensable even, but don't expect a thank you, or eye contact, or a hug. Your day, well, night, starts when the town gets quiet. That's your cue. You grab your tools, a long pole with a hook, a shovel, a lantern, and 2 wooden buckets you desperately hope won't leak. Then you make your rounds, house by house, stopping at the back alley entrances where people keep their privy buckets. You knock quietly. No one answers. That's the idea. They've left their little gifts for you in the dark. You lift the lid and immediately regret your life choices. The smell doesn't hit you. It ambushes you. It tackles your sinuses and robs your will to live. You've developed a special way of breathing. Short, shallow gasps through clenched teeth, just to avoid passing out. It doesn't work. Nothing does. You gag every time. And if you don't, that means something's seriously wrong with your brain. You dump the contents into your own buckets, carefully, because if you spill any on yourself, you'll spend the rest of the night wearing it, and you will spill some. The lids don't always fit. The buckets are heavy. The streets are cobbled and uneven, and Colonial boots have 0 traction. One wrong step, and you're doing the slip and slide of shame through someone else's digestive history. Once your buckets are full, you carry them, slowly, carefully, arms locked like a human forklift, to the town dumping site. Sometimes it's a pit. Sometimes it's a cart. Sometimes it's just a hole in the woods that even raccoons avoid. You unload. You wipe your hands on a rag that hasn't been cleaned since last summer. Then you go back for more. You do this all night. No one sees you. No one talks to you. No one waves. In fact, they avoid you. Children are told you're a warning. Grown-ups cross the street when they see you coming. Dogs bark at your buckets. You smell like old stew and regret. You dream in brown. And if you drop one of those buckets, oh no. There's no coming back from that. You'll be haunted. You'll be remembered. But not in a good way. You're paid just enough to survive, not enough to quit. Certainly not enough to afford soap. You sleep during the day in a shack at the edge of town, not because it's peaceful, but because no one wants you closer. And honestly, neither do you. You wouldn't last a day. And speaking of dark, lonely jobs no one wants to talk about, next, you're digging holes again. But this time, the people you're burying aren't walking away. Welcome to the graveyard.